All right, NAIA football fans, welcome back to another edition of the NAIAFBALL podcast. My name is Matt, and as you can see today, the wonderful, lovely picture of Corey that we got so accustomed to at the beginning of the season is here again. But unfortunately, it's not even that Corey's here. Corey is gone today. It is just your boy. We're going to be talking about NAIA football, get things rolling. That son of a Baptist, Corey, is busy being Corey down in Florida, could not make it today, but has been kind enough to lend the reins to me, probably to his chagrin. But here we are, and we are wrapping up the regular season, heading into the final week of the regular season, if you can believe it. There's a lot of stuff to catch up on, a lot of things to talk about, but before we jump into just about everything, I would be remiss if we didn't mention our wonderful partners at the Urban Edge Network. Obviously, we are streaming every single week on YouTube, but if you guys want to support the show, hop on over to UEN. Make sure you are tuning in on there. We are live every week there, as well as on YouTube. And on top of what they do for the show, they are just wonderful for the NAIA. They've been broadcasting stuff all season long, been doing a great job making NAIA football that much more accessible to everybody and anybody, because let's be real, guys, this is super fun to follow. There's a lot of great football to be played here, and we need more eyes on it. So shout out to Urban Edge Network. They're doing a phenomenal job at that. Let's not waste any time, honestly. There is so much to talk about today, and I want to jump into our games from last week. There were some heavy implications, and we start with Benedictine and Baker. Third-ranked Benedictine in our poll. Ravens grab a 31-10 lead over Baker. Jackson Dooley going 8 for 17, 119 yards, and a touchdown. Nothing that jumps off the stat sheet, but certainly didn't need to do much, especially when Xavier Gorgie is the guy to note there with 25 carries, 196 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Quite the day for him. On third and fourth down, 4 for 12 is not the clip you want to operate at. But Benedictine's defense absolutely got it done against Baker, considering they held them to just 1 conversion on third and fourth down out of 11. That's not even 10%. Truman Yulesgard not turning the ball over a ton, like we've seen in the past when Baker falls in these matchups. But Benedictine, truthfully, was just the better team that day. They moved to 9-1 on the season, basically securing, barring anything dramatic happening this week, a top seed in the NAIA playoffs, and they are looking to roll into the postseason there. Baker pretty much out of contention entirely. There is no room for them to steal a bid after that loss. But I think Baker, too, we definitely need to mention that while this loss isn't ideal for them, they've still rebounded well this season, especially with the way they started. Curious to see how the season ends for them. So now we head over to the Frontier, because of course the Frontier is always going to cause some chaos. But there was no chaos to be had, at least on the College of Idaho side of things. They get a dominant 36-13 win over the Fighting Saints of Carroll, who were ranked ahead of them heading into the matchup. College of Idaho's Caden Young went 11 for 17, 140 yards, a touchdown, and had 2 touchdowns rushing on the ground. Riley Byington also in the ground game with 33 carries for 198 yards and 2 touchdowns, just doing a wonderful job for them. And the defense, man, 3 sacks, 5 tackles for loss, 3 picks, 3 pass breakups, and holding Carroll to -7 yards rushing is absolutely astounding, especially when you see how Carroll's been rolling this season on offense. They shut down Caden Watt, 13 for 32, 132 yards, no passing touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. Certainly not what they would have liked to see heading into this one. And only 1 touchdown in 1 trip to the red zone. Not only was College of Idaho's defense stout when they needed to be, they weren't even allowing the Saints into the red zone more times than not. Very, very strong win for College of Idaho as they look to make a postseason push. They are kind of at the head of the pack on their side of things in the Frontier now with that win. And Carroll's still looking okay. It's more than likely they're going to be able to grab an at-large bid, but things get a bit shakier for them now. We'll talk some bracketology a bit later. I have some notes, and I do apologize because it's not usually my forte. I usually let Corey do that. But Corey, left me out to dry today. I'm kidding, Corey. It's completely fine. You have a life. I get it. But yeah, we'll get to that later because the next game we'll want to talk about, at least we would want to talk about it if my slide would load. So we will jump over to Kaiser and Southeastern, pardon me, in what was a very close contest. Southeastern very much showing up, ready to play, but that Kaiser defense, man, I tell you what, they shut down Nate Mikkel at quarterback there for Southeastern. He only went 4 for 17 on the day for 126 yards, 2 picks, only at 21 yards rushing on the ground, also holding them to under 40% on 3rd and 4th down. And Kaiser, man, they just continue to rack up wins. They remain undefeated with Shea Spencer going for almost 300 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. And like I mentioned, their defense had 2 sacks on the day, 4 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, and 4 pass breakups. Kaiser getting a very solid win to continue their spot at the top of the NAIA. Now, in what would probably be considered an upset here is Kansas Wesleyan. Especially after their recent loss to Friends, where they got absolutely steamrolled, was able to bounce back against McPherson. 20-17 win. McPherson's obviously had a fantastic season and looked like they were carrying their momentum into the back half, but Kansas Wesleyan is able to get it done off the back of Henry Ostad, who had 17 for 27 through the air, 134 yards, and a passing touchdown in the ground game. Goodness, I cannot talk today. DeHeaven Demena with 32 carries, 147 yards, and 2 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown. A very well-rounded effort from Kansas Wesleyan. Both of these defenses really did come to play, truthfully. But the Kansas Wesleyan offense was able to squeak out over 40% on 3rd and 4th down, going 8 for 19 here. And the tail of the tape towards the end of the game especially was with penalties with McPherson. 11 penalties for 100 yards overall on the day, and they had 3 of them alone on the last drive, which ultimately did them in. Jalil Brown still had a very productive day on the ground with 16 carries, 104 yards and a touchdown, and Ryan Markarian going 21 for 36, 196 yards and a touchdown. Certainly productive, but I wouldn't say the dominant performance we've come to expect from those players, especially with Jalil Brown, typically able to put up 250 yards plus all-purpose yards. He's been catching a lot of touchdowns as well as on the ground. Obviously did a good job, but just not quite enough. Penalties ultimately play a big role in everything there. Can we get the Dort and Concordia slide to work? No, I apologize. We are going to have some technical difficulties. As you guys can see here, I'm telling you right now, the slide is there. I promise it is. And I don't know why it's not coming up. Okay, so I'm going to read this from the slide here. Dort obviously getting a very convincing 56-20 win over Concordia. For Dort on the ground, Daniel Dickerson with 12 carries for 97 yards and 4 touchdowns. Dort scored 8 touchdowns and 8 trips to the red zone. That's the offensive efficiency we've come to expect from the defenders. Obviously doing a fantastic job there and being able to hold Concordia's very stout offensive attack and getting start to 50% completion percentage. Ultimately, though, Dort was just kind of able to steamroll here. Concordia put up a good fight for a little bit of the game, but we're not able to close it out in this blank slide, is where you can imagine all those numbers popping up. I don't have time to pop it in here, so you're just going to have to take my word for it. And also, not to mention, in the Sooner, we had a very interesting matchup with Ottawa, Arizona taking on Texas Wesleyan. This was Texas Wesleyan's chance to stay alive in the playoff hunt, and ultimately they fall by 7 points to Ottawa, Arizona. I was actually able to catch the back end of this on my very busy Saturday. It's crossover season, so we had volleyball playoffs and football and basketball and all this other stuff going on. But I was able to catch the end of this. It was a battle down to the wire. But ultimately, Ottawa, Arizona's defense is able to get the stop they need at the end of the game. And even with how high scoring this affair was, truthfully, it's, I don't know. I feel like the defenses were able to make big plays. It just wasn't, a consistent effort, if that makes sense. You'll see on the slide here, both defenses putting up some big numbers. Texas Wesleyan with 11 tackles for loss is an absurd amount. 5 sacks to add to that. A pick, 6 pass breakups, and a QB hurry. And on the other side of things for Ottawa, they have a sack, 2 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, 3 picks, 2 pass breakups, and a QB hurry. Luke Guyron, ultimately, though, getting it done for Ottawa, Arizona, going 23 for 41 through the air. 1 yard shy of 300 on the day, 4 passing touchdowns and a pick, and also had 61 yards rushing and a touchdown on the ground. And Marquez Reese there catching 2 of those touchdown receptions in what was a very solid win for Ottawa, Arizona. And I wish Texas Wesleyan was in a different spot, truthfully, because I think they are a very good team that deserves at least consideration for the playoff. But when you lose, games to open the season, albeit against very good teams, you lose to Mary-Hearted Baylor, a very, very solid D3 squad, among some other falters along the way, just puts you in a bad spot. And it's really unfortunate because this Texas Wesleyan team is very talented. But Ottawa, Arizona, man, getting it done, and they look good doing so. I'm very curious to see how this team does in the postseason. Now, let's head over to, I guess, what could be considered another upset. Certainly with Olivet Nazarene being kind of around the top 25 and recently in the top 25 compared to St. Xavier. But I'll tell you what, man, St. Xavier came to play against Olivet Nazarene, pretty much knocking ONU out of the playoff race and putting themselves in the conversation here with a 21-14 win to rack up their 7th win of the season. Dominic D'Ambrosio going 13 for 21, 188 yards through the air and 2 touchdowns. Also had 37 yards rushing, and Mario Price on the rushing attack as well, going for 58 yards, and also caught 3 passes for 74 yards and a touchdown. On 3rd and 4th down, St. Xavier went 10 for 21, almost at a 50% clip, which is not too shabby at all. And this was a defensive battle all the way through, very low-scoring affair, but St. Xavier was able to get it done when they needed to, holding Olivet Nazarene to just 2 touchdowns and 7 trips to the red zone. We mentioned earlier that, College of Idaho preventing Carroll from getting down to the red zone. Quite the opposite in this one, where they were able to get down into the red zone for Olivet Nazarene. But that St. Xavier defense, bend but don't break. There's definitely some merit to that, as St. Xavier pulls off a big win, and I feel like they are peaking at the right time towards the end of the season. A lot of interesting results, a lot of crazy things going on, but of course, we got to ask ourselves, how does this affect the top 25 poll? Because as we push towards the postseason, we have to account for FPI, things like that. Obviously, these polls hold less weight later in the season as we use metrics to kind of determine our playoff teams here. But man, I still think it's super intriguing to see where some of these teams are going to end up at, especially when you look at how some of these change. And there's a few different faces in here from what we've seen. Obviously, Grandview in that number 1 spot with only 4 first place votes. You have Kaiser in 2nd place, Montana Tech in 3rd, Friends in 4th, which I might add, they received my number 1 vote this week. Again, if you've been following me on Twitter, I talked about that. Benedictine at 5 there, Marion at 6, Dort at 7, Ottawa, Arizona up to 8, Lindsey Wilson to 9, Morningside there at 10, College of Idaho bumps up to 11, Indiana Wesleyan at 12, Campbellsville 13, Carroll down to 14, William Penn up to 15, Southeastern going up to 16 as well, Evangel sitting at 17, St. Francis, Indiana at 18, Montana Western at 19, McPherson at 20, St. Thomas at 21, Southwestern, wrong cardinal direction, pardon me, there at 21, tied with St. Thomas. Georgetown sitting there at 23, and then you have Dakota State entering the poll, our media poll, for the first time this season at 24 after a dominating win over a Rocky Mountain team who's been giving better teams some fits in that conference so far this year. And Mid-American Nazarene slipping back in at 25. It's really interesting to see how this shakes up. Obviously, I joke around a lot as a Dakota Wesleyan graduate as to what Dakota State's doing and where they're at. But truthfully, I have to hand it to the Trojans. They've had a phenomenal end to their season. That loss to Dakota Wesleyan, it's really going to hurt their playoff chances. especially when the committee looks at kind of the crux of that schedule. But the back half, they've been really, really, really good. And I really hate to say it, but they do deserve a nod here in the top 25 because they've been playing some really good football here. But yeah, it's really interesting to see how some of this is shaking out. I like that College of Idaho is creeping in on the top 10. You could certainly make an argument that they deserve to be in there. But it's a very solid top 15 teams or so. I think William Penn is kind of where you start to, make that difference, that differentiation between the top tier of teams. But William Penn has held serve when they've needed to. Obviously, they've lost one or two along the way, but they've won the games they've needed to win and are now vying for an at-large bid in the playoff, which is super awesome for that program. And Southeastern, still had a good showing against Kaiser. They were very competitive. I think they will have a case as well. But before we kind of jump into the final week of the regular season and look at playoffs and look at all this other stuff, let's hear a word from our friends over at AdCraft.
Want to create and sell custom merch for your team or business? That's exciting, but where do you begin? How much inventory should you order? How do you distribute orders? AdCraft has your answers. Streamline the way you offer custom merch by utilizing our risk-free web store service. We ship directly to each customer, and we have the fastest turnaround in the game. Raise funds for your team or get merch to your employees and patrons. Contact AdCraft today and let's bring your merch to life.
And that's exactly what AdCraft does, man. They are absolutely wonderful. They're NAIA born and bred. We bring it up pretty much every single time we talk about them. But based in Iowa, the Grandview folk over there do a phenomenal job because let's face it, if you're running a team, if you're coaching, if you're doing anything of importance with a program, you really don't have time to deal with gear orders and getting stuff figured out. So let AdCraft just take care of it for you. Super high quality merch, wonderful customer service. They ship it right to your customer base, and they do a wonderful job. So thank you to our friends at AdCraft for everything they do. And we also have to say thank you to our buddy Connor Darnell Designs, who does a wonderful job with the overlays, the graphics. I mean, if you need schedule posters, players of the week, any sort of cool stuff, Connor's your guy. Makes really cool stuff. I always talk about the bag tag I have in my work backpack. It is finally starting to fray after so many years of use, but man, I'm going to hold that thing onto my bag for as long as I can because it is that amazing. So hit up Connor for all of your design needs. So now, let's get into some of our players of the week. And I gotta admit, I was looking at some of the stat lines, and there were some insane performances. Colby Duncan of Northwestern, 6 combined touchdowns. There were a few quarterbacks who pushed that 4, 5, 6 touchdown mark on the offensive side of the ball. You had Saunders, for Lindsey Wilson rushing for, like 3 touchdowns and almost 300 yards or something ridiculous like that. But when you throw for 8, you're going to win Player of the Week. Michael Palandri going 19 for 24 for Montana Western, 423 in yardage, and throwing for 8 touchdowns in what is one of the most ridiculous performances I've ever seen in a very dominating fashion. Montana Western obviously has racked up a few losses in their year, but they are certainly trying to make a case to get an at-large bid, especially putting up 60-plus in their game this past weekend. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, truthfully, you could have given this to 2 guys on the Louisiana Christian side. Polk, the DB, had 4 interceptions on the day. That's not a fake stat. He actually had 4 picks. But we decided to go with Jordan Oglesby, who had the well-rounded effort with 12 tackles, 2 sacks, 2.5 tackles for loss, and a forced fumble, and a dominant win for Louisiana Christian, ultimately getting it done against Arkansas Baptist. Really good look for the Cats there as they hope to finish the season strong. I believe there's a chance they're still in the playoff hunt, but I can't remember if that is auto-bid territory or if they've kind of bounced themselves out of that category. But yeah, just an incredible effort across the board. Louisiana Christian looked great. The fact that you have 2 guys in consideration for Player of the Week means you had a super dominating performance. And I gotta say, the Florida Gator colorway there with like the script hat, Corey would probably hate to hear me talk about that right now. But those are pretty sweet, man, I gotta admit. And you know who else is pretty sweet? are our friends at the Headset app, who present our play call of the week each and every week. Because let's face it, traditional headsets are too expensive, too annoying to deal with, and frankly, they don't even work half the time. So why not just use the nifty Headset app on your phone? You can hook it up to your AirPods. You can use it on your device. They have a bunch of private channels available for you and your coaches, so nobody's going to be stealing signals and all that other stuff. And it's just a very intuitive app to be using, especially in an age where football tech sometimes is still behind the times, especially in the NAIA, in the Wild West out here. Sometimes it's hard to get your hands on that sort of technology. So the Headset app is certainly the way to go. And they are presenting our play call of the week. And I will give some context to this after I let it roll, because this looks pretty normal, but there's some pretty important background information here. If this will play, there we go. As you can see here, that's a win for Nelson against Langston in double overtime as you head to the 2-point conversion section of the contest. Obviously, some extracurricular activities there, which is never ideal, but in such a highly charged emotional game, especially when you go to double overtime. It was homecoming for Nelson. I mean, emotions are super high. And being able to pull out a win and trusting your starting quarterback there on the play call there, it is super impressive, because Judah Holtzclaw had an absolute day for Nelson, passing for 200 yards, 18 for 28 through the air, 5 passing touchdowns, and punching it in on the ground there, being able to trust your guy in that sort of situation. You know, the coach calling your number there, you probably want to dial up something a bit more complicated, you know, when you initially see the situation. But Nelson said, you know what? We trust our quarterback. We trust our best player. He's been playing well. Let's put the ball in his hands and see what happens to put this game away. And that's exactly what Nelson does. I feel like we haven't been able to talk about the Sooner in a lot of these games this year. So I wanted to pull a very fun clip for a very dramatic ending to this Nelson-Langston game. And Nelson pulls out the homecoming win in what has been kind of an up and down season for them. Great one to pull off in front of the home crowd. Just an absolutely phenomenal one. And, you know, that's pretty reasonable for why that one is play call of the week. So now we look forward to the final week of the regular season here in the NAIA. There's a lot of interesting things going on here, especially in our what to watch for this week, because you look at it and man, I gotta say, pretty sick that in the GPAC this week we have what is essentially a conference championship game, which we don't get to see a lot of those situations. But Dort going to Sioux City to take on Morningside in what is going to be for the automatic bid. Now, granted, both of these teams are certainly in a situation with the way they've played and the way that their schedules have shaken out to where they're both going to get in the playoff. It's pretty much a guarantee that both teams at this point make it into the playoff. But Dort would certainly be a change of pace for winning the conference. In years prior, they've kind of sat at that number 3 spot behind Northwestern and Morningside in recent years. And this is finally their chance to take advantage of a Morningside team who's fallen to Northwestern, who has another loss on the record from earlier in the season. So, yeah, certainly an interesting one to watch there. As the GPAC guy, I got my eyes on that one. But also Campbellsville at Georgetown is another intriguing one. Georgetown basically playing for their playoff rights here, especially with the few losses they have on the season. One more would probably knock them out of an at-large contention. Now, Campbellsville pretty much also is in the driver's seat in the Mid-South, but we could certainly have chaos ensue where Georgetown wins this game and you're looking at like a 4-way tie for that bid. And I believe the way that shakes out is that Campbellsville would still ultimately get that bid. But man, it could get scary hours if Georgetown pulls that one off, and especially with Campbellsville traveling to Georgetown at 1:30 p.m. That's going to be a really interesting one to keep your eyes on there. And also, let's not forget Benedictine versus a surging Mid-American Nazarene team. You know, this was a team that was ranked in our top 25, and they, fell off a little bit, but they've snuck back in and are looking to upset Benedictine, who has looked very strong for most of the season, with their only loss being to Grandview, who's the number 1 team in the country. And Kansas Wesleyan hosts the 21st ranked Southwestern Mound Builders And what's certainly a very interesting matchup, especially for Kansas Wesleyan, coming off of the big upset win against McPherson. Are they going to be able to rebound after such an emotional win last week against a ranked opponent in Southwestern? They've quietly been chugging along. Their quarterback had 4 or 5 passing touchdowns and crazy yardage across the board. So really excited to see what that one's going to entail. But man, ultimately there's a lot of fun stuff going on in the NAIA in this upcoming week. I'm also going to pull up the schedule because there are always some interesting matchups, especially this late in the season, that don't necessarily have conference implications, but are still fun to look at. Florida Memorial at St. Thomas is one I'm super intrigued by. And let us not forget that the AAC basically conference title game for the automatic bid, Pikeville going to Georgia to take on Reinhardt. Winner of that game will make the playoff with an automatic bid. The loser will be sent home, especially with the way that the FPI and the rankings have them. Neither of these teams or anybody in the AAC, truthfully, have a high enough FPI to be in the conversation. So this is, you got to get the automatic bid or you're done. Which is, back against the wall there. St. Francis, Illinois is going to Olivet Nazarene. Can Olivet Nazarene bounce back after what's been a rough couple of weeks for them? Going to be interesting there to see how that one goes. Northwestern taking on Concordia down there in Nebraska in Seward is going to be another interesting one to keep your eyes on as well. Concordia obviously losing to Dordt the week prior. And Northwestern surging at the right time. They are back in the top 25 official poll, not our poll. We aren't quite believers in the Red Raiders like the coaches poll is, but certainly an interesting matchup there that'll be taking place. And looking through everything else, Mount Marty at Midland will probably be a fantastic game. Can Dakota State finish their slate strong as they host Montana State Northern? And yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, Lindsey Wilson also traveling to Bethel, Tennessee. There could certainly be some weird things going on there if Bethel is to take the win over Lindsey Wilson. So we will see how that one shakes out. And it's going to be really interesting, especially with so many things at stake. You know what I mean? We got Louisiana Christian going to Ottawa, Arizona, looking to finish the season strong. And Eastern Oregon at Carroll. Eastern Oregon has had a sneaky, pretty good season. And Carroll's obviously reeling from that last loss. So a lot of good matchups to take place there. Man, it is crazy to think, too, that we are so far along in the season, and we are at this point. I feel like it was yesterday we were doing our summer previews, and you blink, and we are looking at postseason and automatic bids and bracketology and all that sort of stuff. Now, I don't have any visuals for you guys here, so our audio listeners, nothing changes for you. But I do want to mention there are some interesting things going on. The updated FPI dropped today, and you're looking at a really interesting list of teams here. I'm going to go down in order, and first of all, I do need to shout out our buddy here, Zach, who is putting all this stuff together out of the goodness of his heart, or truthfully more so interest in what's going on. So I got to give a shout out to Zach there because, this stuff is just absolutely wonderful to look at and see it all compiled. So shout out to our bowling friend who is out and about. And honestly, we probably could have had him on the show this week if we would have planned accordingly. But nonetheless, this information is still provided by him. And of course, the FPI dropped, but this is all pre-ARC. The next ARC ratings, I believe, come out next week. Which is going to be, probably going to shake things up a little bit. But you're looking at a top 20 going from bottom to top. The 20th seed in the playoff right now will be your winner in the AAC, Pikeville or Reinhardt, winner of that game this weekend. We already talked about. Is going to get that automatic bid. And then at 19, we have McPherson, who, despite the loss, is still certainly in contention with the season they had. 18 is Montana Western, which I find super intriguing, but they have some really quality losses on their schedule. And truthfully, Carroll and College of Idaho and Montana Tech are all pretty much playoff teams. So those aren't bad losses to have on your resume. It's just the fact you've racked up 3 of them is less than ideal for you. And then ahead of them at 17 is Evangel, who's pretty much all but locked up the automatic bid at this point. Southeastern at 16, William Penn at 15, 14 would be Morningside with the loss to Dort, assuming that situation is to hold true. 13 is Carroll. 12 is Indiana Wesleyan with a win. 11 would be College of Idaho with chalk the rest of the way with these other teams I'm about to bring up. Number 10 would be Lindsey Wilson with a Dort loss or a College of Idaho loss, which would be super intriguing. 9 would also be Lindsey Wilson in consideration there with chalk in the above teams, or would be Dort if Dort is to lose to Morningside. Now, at 8, we have Campbellsville with a Dort win against Morningside, but that spot could be the Mustangs if they pull out the win against Dort. And like I said, they're hosting, so certainly could happen. Number 7 would be either Dort or Campbellsville, depending on the results this weekend. Marion sitting solidly at 6, Friends at 5, Kaiser at 4, Montana Tech at 3, Benedictine at 2, and your Grandview Vikings sitting at number 1 there. Super intriguing, and of course with those ratings, that also means that your top 4 teams that would be earning first round byes if the playoffs started today would be Grandview of Iowa with the number 1 seed, Benedictine of Kansas with the number 2 seed, Montana Tech with the number 3 seed, and Kaiser with the 4 seed. Friends would be 5th on the bubble there, looking to steal a bye potentially against Kaiser. Kaiser's in kind of a precarious spot, especially with the forfeit against Bethel, especially with how Bethel's finished the year. That's a win that they would definitely want legit on their schedule. But I think it's going to be very interesting to see how these top 5 teams kind of shake out as the final ARC ratings come out soon. And I don't know, it's just really intriguing to see. Now, we've talked about some of these conference scenarios, bids, and all of that, and a lot of it makes a lot of sense, and a lot of it's pretty sensical. You look at it, you're like, okay, this needs to happen, or this needs to happen, and this team gets in, or this team gets in. Pretty easy. Now, we're going to be talking hypothetical in this situation, of course, following this weekend of competition. But it is worth mentioning that, we talked about the Mid-South being chaotic, potentially with 4 teams tying at a 4-2 conference record or something ridiculous like that if Bethel's to win. But both sides of the Mid-States would like something to say about that, because there is a chance we have ultimate chaos on both sides of that conference. Now, in the Midwest, you are looking at Marion, who's 4-0, who's taking on a hot St. Xavier team, sitting at 3-1 on the season in their regular season closer. Now, St. Xavier is to win. There's another team that gets added into the mix here at 3-1 in conference, and that is St. Francis of Indiana. Now, St. Francis of Indiana holds a win over St. Xavier, but if St. Xavier is to win against Marion, who has a win over St. Francis, Indiana, you see how it kind of triangulates, how it gets a bit complicated there. The tiebreaker in that situation comes down to a coach's vote. I mean, we're basically flipping coins in the parking lot to determine who gets automatic bids if St. Xavier is to win, which is crazy, but I'd be really intrigued to see how that shakes out. And you have the exact same scenario in the Mid-East on the other side of the playoff, with Siena taking on Indiana Wesleyan at 4-0, Siena at 3-1. If Siena is to win, that bumps Taylor into consideration because Taylor has a win over Siena, and they've also lost to Indiana Wesleyan. That would also come down to a coach's vote if Siena is to defeat Indiana Wesleyan. Now, are those results likely? Probably not, especially because Marion has looked super good this year, and Indiana Wesleyan has been rolling in conference play. But I don't know. St. Xavier certainly has a shot with how hot they've been. Siena would be more of the jarring upset. But when you're in your last season as a football program, not much to lose. Could certainly be a Cinderella story as we head towards the postseason, upsetting an Indiana Wesleyan team who's usually had their way with the MSFA in recent years. So that would be super interesting to take a look at. But man, I gotta tell you guys, like I've been saying all episode long, I am super pumped to get into the postseason, to talk playoffs, to talk these matchups, especially when I went to the national championship game last year and got to cover that for NAIAFBALL. Just an absolutely wonderful time, and I'm really excited to see how things shake out. I think we're going to have a bit more parity in the playoffs than we did last year. Not that that's a good or a bad thing. I'm just saying I feel like there's a lot more teams kind of in that upper tier that are competitive. But it's always hard because we don't necessarily know how, conferences translate when you look at conference play and how that translates to the national scale. Now, you want to talk about national scale. These folks, our patrons, are okay, I was going to do like a national championship thing there. I lost it, okay? But we do love our patrons. That is not lost in all of that because they are absolutely wonderful. You can scan the QR code on your screen now or head to patreon.com/NAIAFBALL to get involved, get access to our Discord, get access to all of our quote-unquote insider information. It's really just us talking about playoffs and stuff. But it is an absolutely great time. We have a wonderful community, and you could certainly be a part of it. So we want to say big thank you to our patrons, DSU Co., Roger Meyer, Jeremy Vobble, Fred Christensen, Ace Wellen, Marty Siebel, Kyle Gregory, Tyler Pierce, Justin Hoffman, Steve Speakman, Brian Shake, Julian Shager, Nate Soapbeer, Stephen Cutler, Julie Lout, Tim Burrow, Nathan Moore, Ryan, Jason Crawford, Todd Nix, Sean Chamberlain, Zach Lance, Casey Wilson, Carol C. Suggs, Derek Lars, Christopher Zwiener, Joey Breckel, Coke and Nicholas, and Swede Nation. Guys, we are finally looking down the barrel of playoffs, and it's a great time to be an NAIA football fan. Ultimately, that's what it boils down to. It's a wonderful time to be watching this stuff. I'm sure if Corey were here, he'd agree with me. It's like he's here with us in spirit with his beautiful smile below me on the screen. But let's take a look at some comments. We got some here in the YouTube chat. Hello, everyone. I hope everybody finishes strong. Derek Smith, I do too. But unfortunately, teams have to win games and teams have to lose games. So, not everybody can finish strong. But certainly a lot of our postseason teams are going to do so. Benedictine's legit. I feel like they could be number 2, but Kaiser's a nice win. Yeah, it's also hard with Benedictine because they do have a loss. Granted, it is to the number 1 team in the country, obviously. But the fact that Kaiser's remained undefeated and the fashion that they've won some of these games in and gotten these high-quality wins in certainly you're not going to hear much argument for me about putting Kaiser number 2 over Benedictine, but I feel like the way Benedictine's played, you could certainly justify it the other way as well. Friends will make a legit run at the championship. I, Derek, am in the same exact boat. I'm a firm believer in Friends. That's why they've been my number 1 team in the country for 2 weeks in a row. Granted, you look at their schedule and you look at, compared to like Benedictine or Morningside, their schedule certainly isn't as strong. But any team that has any sort of national relevance this year, Friends has still managed to absolutely run over. I mean, Kansas Wesleyan just came off of a win against a top 20 McPherson team. And the week before, Kansas Wesleyan was blown out by like 60 points by Friends. So there's certainly something there for the Friends Falcons. I will keep singing their praises pretty much until they either win the national title or lose somewhere along the way. But I certainly think they have a shot. I mean, gosh, they were close last year against Grandview in what was a fantastic game. So certainly could make a shot there. Mr. Iherd, hello. How are you doing? I hope Charlotte is treating you well, my friend. Thanks for tuning in. Just wanted to say, you're killing it. Hashtag Wesleyan till I die. I agree, my friend. And I'm sure all of our friends would say the same thing. Thank you for tuning in, Mr. Ryherd. All right, going to give it one last second here to see if anybody wants any final words. I don't think so. So in that case, I very much appreciate you guys bearing with me through some of the technical difficulties. There's a reason why Corey runs the show usually, because he's much better at this than I am. But we still wanted to get something out for you guys. We still wanted to talk about all these games, and especially just being so close to the playoffs. We couldn't afford to miss this. So thank you, Corey, for getting me all the materials I needed to make this production possible. Yeah, if there's anything else, I'll give it one more second to see if there's anything else in chat. But yeah, I think that'll be it for the NAIFBALL show for week 11. I am super excited to officially, there's no more hypotheticals next week. There's no more hypotheticals. We know what we're getting with the postseason. We will be able to look at, what the bracket looks like, what FPI is at, what the arc is potentially going to be at, and the good times are going to be rolling. Bring up bracketology. I did, Chris. You missed it. Were you here? I talked about the mid states and kind of that whole situation. We brought up some of the other conferences in the mid South. We talked about the GPAC. We talked about where pretty much most of the frontier is in. We talked about the AAC. Talked about the Sooner because Ottawa, Arizona is pretty much locked that up. There's a lot of chaos going on here for Decision Sunday. So, and yeah, National Bowler One there in chat is our guy, Zach, who has given us all of these phenomenal talking points. My notes earlier when we were talking bracketology. Just great stuff. You know what I mean? We have such a wonderful community who is so willing and so able and so hands-on with what we do. Like, truthfully, our stuff wouldn't be nearly as good if we didn't have such a committed community that is so about this stuff. So I do actually want to wait one more second because, Zach, I feel like now I'm missing something, even though I feel like I covered most of your notes there. Any Wesleyan besides Indiana Wesleyan? Roger, I agree, my friend. That's why we're all Dakota Wesleyan fans over here. And by us, I mean everybody who's watching. Congratulations if you're watching this. You are also a Dakota Wesleyan Tiger fan. You don't have a choice. Zach Reichert with the DW, better than MMU, better than Dakota State. It's true. I mean, the results don't lie. And they spelled disaster for you at Sacrifice, Samoa Joe. I don't know if anybody would actually get that reference, if people even know what TNA is nowadays. But there we are. Okay. Speak now or forever hold your peace, chat. Because otherwise, we're going to be closing this thing out. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at NAIAFBALL. Also, peep the Instagram. We post our graphics there every week with our top 25 polls, our players of the week. And, Twitter on game day for NAIAFBALL is always a great time. We're retweeting scores. We're talking about stuff. It's just, it's always fun following on game day. Now, granted, I'm usually working on game day, so I don't get to do that. But that's Corey's job. Corey gets to do the fun stuff there. So, that's all I got for you guys. So thank you all for tuning in. And next week, we will be back. Corey will be back. We'll be talking full-on, tried and true, solidified playoff bracketology. And, until next time, we'll see you guys on the Twitter feeds.